Hola, I'm Jorge Ramos.
And I'm Paula Ramos.
And this is The Moment. Paola, I know that you love going to the movies, and it's award season, and the Oscars are just around the corner. And one of the films that has surprisingly resonated with so many is The Secret Agent, the film completely in Portuguese.
So The Secret Agent, Dad, is set in 1977 in the midst of Brazil's military dictatorship. The film follows a young academic, a father, who goes back to his hometown, hides in a community of other political refugees. It's a beautiful film. It's a mystery. You can see it's a political thriller. You laugh, you cry, but it's really a film that touches on authoritarian regimes' ability to erase identity, to erase this collective memory that people hold on to.
So the film is directed by Kleber Mendonça Filho, and it's the second time a Brazilian film has ever been nominated for Best Picture. Not only that, Paula, he's also running for Best International Movie, Best Actor, and Best Casting. And Wagner Moura, the lead actor in the film, has also made history by becoming the first Brazilian ever to be nominated for Best Actor.
So yeah, look, there's a lot of buzz around this film, and we have the privilege of talking to the film director. And I'm wondering, Dad, if the reason why this film is resonating so much in the United States is because it's kind of making us think about what we're going through as a country here. What it means to be also Latinos in the United States, carrying a lot of the generational trauma that Kleber touches on his own film.
And also the importance of speaking up. So our conversation with Kleber Mendonça Filho when we come back. Kleber, what a pleasure to talk to you. We just saw your movie and we're so impressed. So we have just a few questions, Paul. Go ahead.
Officially, welcome to The Moment. Like my dad said, it's an honor to have you. And I want to start just by congratulating you for your incredible film. It's obviously a historic moment for you, also for Brazilian cinema. The Secret Agent received 4 Oscar nominations, including Best Picture. And so that's where I want to start, Kleber, just for you taking us back to that moment and how you felt when you received these 4 nominations.
Well, we had many friends at home on a Thursday morning, which is unusual. And it really felt like a very important moment after so many months traveling with the film and showing the film in so many countries. The film had its world premiere at the Cannes Film Festival in May. And I have been doing what I think filmmakers do frequently, which is to travel with the film and to give interviews and talk to people, talk to cinephiles and go to screenings. And the nominations felt like, strong recognition for a job well done. I'm very proud of, the crew, the cast. Mm-hmm. This is the first ever casting Oscar, and we got recognized. I'm so proud of those faces in the film. It says a lot about my country, and I think each film says a lot about its country, the country where it was made. Mm-hmm. And yeah, it's a very proud moment for all of us who made The Secret Agent.
So obviously you won 2 Golden Globes, Best Director in Cannes, as you just mentioned, and it seems that something is happening right now, Kleber, with the Brazilian cinema. What I wonder, what is it? Because the dictatorship was, what is it, from 1964 to 1985?
Yes.
It's been 40 years. So what is happening? Does it take that long to understand your own country?
Well, we have in Brazil the public funding for the arts. It's in our constitution. So we have had over the last, let's say, 20 years, very serious work done in terms of choosing projects and finding new faces and new voices. Just to give you an idea, in 2008, I was a very young voice. I was only making short films. And that's when I had the opportunity of having my first script, Neighboring Sounds, getting funding for, to become a feature film. I am now established and I have made 5 or 6 films, but I began with Neighboring Sounds, which came from a project approved by the Ministry of Culture. And now, and I can tell you this as a programmer, I'm still a film programmer. I see more and more new names and new faces and new films coming from different areas of Brazil where before no films were ever made. And I really think that we're beginning to see the fruits, the products of investment. It doesn't mean that every film is great. And that wouldn't apply to any country or not even to Hollywood. But it's really just about giving, opportunities to new voices and looking at your own society. I think the best films are about life in society and how to live it and the obstacles of living life. These are the best films. Even the best comedies are about that. And thankfully, we had a wonderful film last year, I'm Still Here by Walter Salles.
Yeah.
Of course.
And this year, we have The Secret Agent. But I should point something out. There are so many different layers of success, The Oscars is one, of course, classic way of measuring success, but you can see success in so many different ways, And there are many different kinds of films being made.
I wanted to ask you, Kleber, once somebody asked Guillermo del Toro about how he combines the darkness and the beautiful, and his answer was fantastic. He said, "Because I'm Mexican, and I'm also from Mexico, and I understand exactly what he does. I mean, we deal with death and life at the same time."
Yes.
I wonder if your answer on how you combine the beauty and the darkness in your own movie, in The Secret Agent, if your answer is going to be because I'm Brazilian.
Because I'm Brazilian. I love
He'll know that. I'll send it to Guillermo.
I love Guillermo. And I really believe that any good story can be told anywhere. But it is true that in countries where inequality exists, the tension, the conflict, the pain, the beauty, the colors, the joy, everything seems to get enhanced in a way, I still, as I said, I go back and say it's possible to tell a beautiful story anywhere. But I do believe that Latin America and being Latin American gives me, or maybe gives us, if I think of so many friends and colleagues who make films in Latin America, maybe we see the mix in a peculiar way. It's not the only way, I have to point out, but it is one way. And I think a lot of the reactions to The Secret Agent, they're quite surprised and often seduced by how dark the film can be, but also how full of life and love and affection it can be. And having lived through difficult political years recently in my country, I realized that the best thing that you do is you get together with your friends, the people you love. And I think a lot of The Secret Agent comes from that feeling of just hanging out with the right people to make sure that things will pass and to see things through, to let it happen and see how we can survive on the other end.
And my dad and I were just talking about how there's this subtle, almost quietness and normalcy to the way in which you depict that year, 1977. I think when you think of these brutal dictatorships, we were just talking about it, you think of the military tanks, the loudness, the violence, but I think you're able to take us to a quietness that people don't really associate with military dictatorships. And so much of course, The Secret Agent, yes, it's a thriller. Yes, there's some mystery. Yes, there's a sort of like riff on film noir, but it's really about depicting that moment. And you were around 10, 11 years old in 1977, if I'm correct.
9, yeah.
You were 9. Okay, so you're 9 years old in 1977. You yourself are from Recife in northern Brazil, which is, of course, where your protagonist is hiding along with other refugees. And so I'm wondering how much of this film was based on your own ability to piece together memories.
Well, I think childhood memories remain strong even as you grow older. I think we can pretty much agree on that. And I remember 1977. It's probably the first year that I remember vividly. I also remember when I began to show the script, I had one wonderful person from the French co-production, and she asked if the photography would be dark. And I said, no, no, it should be bright and colorful and technicolor-like and full of life. Because I don't see the point of telling kind of a dark story in dark tones, you know? You should go the other way. Well, that's what I think anyway. And I remember, you know what I remember? I remember going to the cinema. I remember Coca-Cola, which I kind of fell in love with as a child, and
Really?
I wasn't allowed to drink even every week. But I remember playing football and carnival, but I also remember going to school, and on a Friday, the school made us march like little soldiers, which is just insane and ridiculous. Yeah, I remember my mother saying that there was always some men sitting in the back of the classroom, just there, not taking notes, and nobody knew who they were. They were not part of the class, you know. So those little things, they stuck to me. But of course, a lot comes from so many stories that I heard this is in the film, actually, stories that you hear and they become yours. And it's almost like it's your memory, but it's not your memory. These are implants that you got from your uncles, from friends of the family, from your parents. And a lot of that came back as I was writing the script and all the other research stuff, of course.
That's interesting. You mentioned that. So obviously my father is Mexican. My mom is Cuban. My mom's side of the family, they're Cuban exiles. And I think obviously as the younger generation, so much of my memory and my identity, I think is built from my parents' memories, which I think is something that you, of course, touch on the movie, you know, this idea of generational trauma and how that really goes down the line. You mentioned your mom. I know that your mom was a very, very well-known historian, oral historian. And I mentioned her because obviously in 1979, Brazil passes their own amnesty law. So much of the military dictatorship, right? And so much about your film, yes, it's about memory, but it's about the erasure of identity, you know, the erasure of these memories. And as I was watching, I was thinking of the way in which your mother, as a historian, influenced you and influenced this film and really influenced your idea of art.
Yeah, she did, but it's really hard to weigh and measure how much, but she must have, because she was I grew up listening to interesting explanations. Why is this the way it is, you know?
Right.
Why do they dress like this, you know? Where does the notion of racial prejudice come from in a country that only got to abolish slavery in 1888? And which was one of her main themes that she studied, you know. So yeah, clearly. And I also love the way she wrote. Even as an academic, she wrote in a way that was so not academic. It was so clear and intelligent, but without the flourishes that some people in academia use, so maybe even to hide behind these flourishes, you know. This is something that she used to tell me a lot, especially when I did journalism, and she really liked the way I write, and I think I took after her in a way. So yeah, I think the film is also about amnesia in a strange, but not amnesia, casual amnesia or amnesia after an accident. You know, there's a construction to political amnesia. You know, it's designed. Archives and files can be burned and burned down. they can burn down in the middle of the night. The amnesty law was almost like an amnesia pill, like a self-inflicted Ozempic of amnesia,
Yeah.
and that did a lot of harm to Brazilian society, I think, which I think it's one of the ideas towards the end of the film. You have this adult who used to be a child, and he has really no not even
recollection of
emotional association to his father, who loved him so much.
Kleber, I want to ask you about other of your main characters, not only Marcelo and Armando, but Elsa. At some point during the film, she says, here is improvise, Brazilian style. She says that. And I wonder if Brazilian audiences are getting something that international audiences don't get. There's an incredible scene of a hairy leg by itself. It's almost like a dream.
Yes.
Moving and kicking people.
Yeah.
So what is it that we don't get? And then please explain the hairy leg.
Well, hopefully you got the film, and I've asked myself many times, what didn't I get watching, Kurosawa, or watching a Robert Altman film like Nashville, which is so much about the United States as a culture and then American music. And so hopefully we all understand these films, even if we don't get 101% of each little tiny detail. But when Elsa says Brazilian style, it really means that they're trying to make that work in a non-professional, but in a way that is full of hope and goodwill. But they don't really have a structure. They don't really have an office. They're just really trying to help other people. That's really what's happening there. And also, Armando says this is like the Witness Protection Program, which of course is this incredible program that exists in the US, and it's, if I'm not mistaken, is with the FBI, and I imagine there's a lot of money and infrastructure to make that work. So it's the complete opposite of what the Witness Protection Program would be. Not to mention that it's under the radar, what Elsa is trying to do. And the hairy leg is very much an urban legend, which was created by a couple of journalists. They had to deal with censorship, and instead of just having their articles slashed, they came up with the hairy leg, and they actually ran stories not saying that the police or the military police or the security forces did what they did, but instead of using those words, they used the hairy leg, and people quickly picked up on the irony. The hairy leg attacked again last night and sent people to hospital, especially from the gay community. People, just workers coming back home that the police felt like they could beat up. And this became the hairy leg. And I remember as a kid being terrified of the hairy leg. There was a school that
Really?
canceled one afternoon in school because the principal heard that the hairy leg was on the loose. So I always wanted to use it in the film, and it's something that Guillermo del Toro asked me recently. And then we talked about the different notions of urban legends, and many cities have their own urban legends.
So that was one obsession. Another one, Kleber, I think, is this obsession with sharks. Jaws is obviously a movie that you make a reference. If I can correctly, it was in 1975 by Steven Spielberg. You must have been 8 or 9. So what is it about sharks? Because there's I was going to say a horrible scene, but maybe let me just say there's a beautiful scene of a hairy leg inside a shark.
Yeah.
And I won't say more than that.
Well, first thing, I come from a city which is a coastal city. We have great beaches, and we also have a shark problem. It's tragic. In fact, 3 weeks, maybe a month ago, a little boy of 13 died in a new attack. And so that's one thing. The urban beach in Recife is quite wonderful. It's clean and it's a great urban beach, but no one swims. No one goes in because we've had, in the last 35 years, we had 31 deaths in the last 35 years and many injuries and mutilations. So it's part of the state of mind of Recife, the shark thing. The other thing is that the film set in 77. I really love the way cultural artifacts, books and music and movies, they may be part of a new story. So I love the sequence in the film where Wagner's character goes into the cinema, and we can see that The Omen is screening in that cinema.
Yeah.
And Jaws was a major popular phenomenon all over the world and also in Recife. And the idea that that little boy is in fact me in that sense. I was the little boy who wanted to see Jaws, but no one would allow me to see Jaws because it was rated 14, and I wouldn't even be able to get in because it was very strict. At the door they really said, "You're not 14, you can't come in." But the film just developed mythical qualities in my mind even before I saw it. I saw it at 14. That's when I saw the film, and I thought that it would be wonderful to mention it in the film. And I love the way it comes in and out of the film a few times.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
How long have you been thinking about this film? I mean, I think, let me bring us to the present for a second. Obviously, here in the United States, Trumpism seems like an unprecedented movement. Obviously, it's not. It's still very much rooted in so much of our past. But I think Bolsonaro, of course, is a figure that has been compared to Trump. But Bolsonaro also brings Brazil back to this dark past, back to the 70s. And so is this a film that you have been thinking about literally since, your days playing as a kid, thinking about the beach? And or is this a film that was perhaps driven and also inspired by this return of Bolsonaro? And did that push any themes in your mind that you wouldn't have otherwise explored in this film?
This is a really great question, but it's also a question that it's almost like reverse engineering, because when I go back to the moment I was beginning to think about the film, I think a lot about what's going on right now, because I've been thinking about the new film or future film for about a year. So I was still working on the editing for Secret Agent, post-production, began to travel with the film, and I keep thinking about the next film.
Wow. Are you going to give us a spoiler?
It's not really a spoiler because I have mentioned in a couple of interviews that it should take place in the 1930s in Recife, which is a coastal town, it's a port city, and there was a lot going on before the war broke, and with The Secret Agent, I had been thinking about it for a while. It came from the desire to work with Wagner, but it also came from my previous film. So it's like one film takes me to the next film.
Right.
And that previous film, Pictures of Ghosts, which you can see in the US and movie, that film really gave me The Secret Agent because it gave me so much archival material about the city that it really put me in this beautiful mood, emotional landscape that I really wanted to explore writing the script for this one. But then it's really hard to explain because as I was writing, I realized that the Bolsonaro years, they had a very strong influence in the logic of what I was writing, because the Bolsonaro years, they were really one of the most bizarre developments I've ever witnessed. a group of older men trying to bring back the good old days of the military dictatorship into Brazil in the 21st century. That's basically, in a simple explanation, that's what happened. And that was quite instructive in terms of, writing about history and rewriting history and the notion of the past and the past that no one remembers anymore. In Brazil, I realized at some point, because I was accused of making a film about the past 50 years. So if you remember something, you may be accused of being a political radical just because you remember, just because you say, no, that's not how it happened. I know how it happened, radical. It's just because the version, the official version, is not that one, but that's not how it happened. But it's just a film, after all. Just a movie.
Well, maybe it's not just a film. But I want to ask you about that. Recently, I read an interview with you and with Wagner Moura, in which both of you were saying that you had to pay a price for speaking up against Bolsonaro.
Yeah.
And as you know, in Latin America, it's different than in the United States. But in Latin America, artists, writers, people like you constantly have opinions and participate in political life. That's normal.
Yeah.
I see it in Mexico. It happens in Brazil. And I wonder, when you see what's happening right now in the United States, where there's a reluctance from certain artists to participate politically, if you think that artists and in cinema, they are really speaking up against Donald Trump right now, and if they should, if that's their role.
I'm not sure I can tell my American friends what they should or shouldn't do. In Brazil, I have been very vocal because I've been very naturally put in situations where I was asked what I think. I remember when the Bolsonaro disaster was about to happen, I was asked on a television show, what do you think Bolsonaro could be an interesting option for Brazil? And I said, I don't think so. I don't think it's an option. I don't think this should be considered. I think it's going to be a disaster for our country. That's all I said. And it just became this, I mean, what was I supposed to do? Oh, I don't know. Let's see, man. Let's maybe.
Well, it was a pretty strong
it's going to
statement.
be interesting.
It was a strong statement. It was a strong statement.
Yeah, but I was right. After 4 years, it was a disaster for our country. And I don't think you can mince words with something so serious. And yeah, so I think that, as you know, I don't think I ever wrote a script thinking that it would be a political film. I just told a story. These are stories that we tell. And then at some point they begin to get reactions. This is a political film, and I accept that. It's all right. But depending on the situation, it's I really don't think you can avoid questions. I say that you're not a political filmmaker, because at the end of the day, films are seen and they're discussed, and there are many ideas in films and books. And if you present an honest depiction of society, I think the political conversation is a given.
So with this idea of not avoiding questions, let me just ask it that way. Do you think that what we are living right now in the United States is similar to the first days of the dictatorship in Brazil? Is the United States becoming a dictatorship slowly?
I think there is a movement which is happening in different countries, and it's beginning to be felt in Europe, or maybe it's already underway in Europe after a number of years, where we seem to be distancing ourselves as societies from what we used to know as, a perfectly working or an imperfectly working democracy. Democracy is a very imperfect system, but you can tell when things are, running in a way that is that makes sense for most of the population in terms of the laws, in terms of respect for the others, and I have been following, with attention, my dear U.S. friends, people I love, my colleagues from cinema, people I met throughout my life, and they seem to be very worried. But as a Brazilian, I mean, we went through a very tough moment, and it passed. It passed because we were very lucky because the Supreme Court justices, they did their job.
Right.
That's one thing that really happened. And a lot of the absurdity of the former president's government. There are still hundreds of crimes to be investigated, but the coup d'état against the newly re-elected President Lula when Bolsonaro lost the election, there was a coup d'état or an attempt that was plotted, and they had all the plans laid out, and they found out about all the information. And for that, he's now in jail, and many of his inner circle are in jail. So hopefully, a society should protect itself, using the tools of justice.
Right. And here don't have to tell you, here we're talking about a United States of America where, the president has literally pardoned every person that was involved in our January 6th insurrection. So I think that just gives everyone...
Interestingly, the crowd that took over the government buildings in the copycat incident in Brazil, everything was shot on video. They shot themselves on video, and they are all in jail. And the evidence is just so dramatic.
Yeah, and that's the era that we're in, where I think we talked a lot about this in our show, right? Which is the way in which the resistance that's building in this country, the best tool that we have is actually our phones, right? And capturing, to your point, these memories and this history on our phones, while the government is telling so many of its citizens to not believe their own eyes, to not believe sort of what they're recording. But Kleber, I want to take you, as we wrap this conversation, I want to take you to your years as a film critic, right? And perhaps one never, once you're a film critic, I imagine that's something that's a hat that you always wear. You spend years sort of criticizing, viewing, analyzing other people's arts, other people's films.
Admiring
other people, of course. How does that shape your own filmmaking? What impact has that had on you?
Similar to the question about my mother as a historian, I'm sure that it gave me, the best thing about criticism as a personal exercise is exactly what I just said. It's almost like a daily exercise that you do, not for the body, but for the mind. You're put in the position of trying to understand. That's what I try to do, trying to understand what culture is trying to tell us. You might even look at a romantic comedy and say, this is interesting. I look at what's happening in Denmark or in Hollywood. And so I think that this intellectual training of looking at what film, the industry, auteurs are trying to tell you is really interesting. And I did a lot of that for 13 years. Every Friday they would publish 4 or 5 reviews written by myself throughout the week, and it was a lot of work, and it was a great moment in my life. And at some point, I just began to get tired. I was exhausted. And I had become an opinion machine. I would have people call me on the weekend. They would be standing outside in the cinema and say, what should I watch? And it's like, I'm not your weekend consultant, man.
Yeah.
Just go and see anything and hope you'll like it. But yeah, I'm sure it must have given me some interesting chops, in terms of making films. But I could never tell you exactly how or when. It's like somebody who works in a library and became a writer, I'm sure it must have had an impact on her or him, but I don't know,
Yeah.
Kleber, before you go, this is the last question. I was just checking the New York Times. People in London campaigning for the Oscars. Award season is in Hollywood. We've heard it's very, very intense. And I wonder if you learned anything about the process of campaigning. I'm sorry about the word, campaigning for an Oscar. Is that...
Well, the campaign. First thing, I'm very lucky that I'm getting the opportunity to work with Neon. I really enjoy working with them. They're cinephiles. The second thing is, so many people ask me, you must be fed up with all of this. You must be tired. The fact is, I'm a good sleeper. If I sleep, I wake up fresh. And to be honest, I've been for months doing this tour where I'm getting to meet some really amazing people that I've always admired. And they came to meet me because they liked The Secret Agent. And one night I'm, having dinner with the people from Skywalker Sound in San Francisco. And the other day I'm meeting for lunch, Lupita Nyong'o. And it's just a great moment, and introducing screenings and doing Q&As and talking to people outside the cinema and talking to the press like I'm talking to you today. It's just something that I enjoy, and it's part of what it is to be a filmmaker. And I don't know if in the future I'll just get fed up and say, I don't think I want to do, traveling anymore. I don't think so, because I've done it for my other films, but this is the most I've ever traveled in my life. I'm traveling a lot, and I'm getting to travel with my producer, who happens to be my wife. So we are together, which is a good thing. Yeah.
That's amazing.
Thanks so much for talking to us. Good luck at the Oscars. We'll be watching.
Thank you very much. It was great talking to you.
I appreciate it. Thank you. Paula, so this is like going to the movies after the popcorn, and then you come out of the theater, and then you say...
And you're like, what'd you think?
What do you think? I remember when you were growing up, something that I learned from you is your love for movies. Always going to the movies with your mom, no?
Always. That's one of the things that my mom always did when I was growing up. In fact, that's one of my first memories, which is interesting because Kleber said that one of his first memories was when he was 9 years old, around the time that was 1977 in Brazil. And it's funny, when he was saying that, I think some of my initial memories was also being around 8, 9 years old, living in Madrid. And I have these very vivid memories, of course, of my mom, taking me and my sister to the movies. And that's one of the first things that I thought about. Do you remember what you were doing when you were 9, or where you were?
No, because in my case, at home, it was not that common to go to the movies. I think it was too expensive. We were 5 kids, so you would have to pay 5 tickets and then 5 popcorns, and so that was not the case. However, I do remember that my dad loved the James Bond movies. So every time there was a new James Bond movie, we would go to the movies. But it was like a major event, once in a year, once every 2 years. Not like you that you went to the movies constantly all the time.
Yeah, but I think one of the things that really stuck with me was, and he mentioned this, right? His choice of looking back at that era, right? An era where Brazil was, of course, in the middle of this brutal military dictatorship, but choosing to not just focus on the darkness and making an intentional decision to portray a brighter Brazil. Now that was, of course, based on his memories as a child, right? And so he mentions like going to the movies, like drinking Coca-Colas, in the beach. And I think it made me think of a couple of things, but one, which is something that you and I have been talking about, which is perhaps the most dangerous parts of authoritarianism, right? Which is the way in which it can be so quiet and it can become so normal, and the way in which you can almost like detach yourself from that political reality and continue life as normal and be a kid and grow up in that. And I thought that was a really interesting decision to make.
Yeah, I didn't expect that, because when I heard about the movie and then I read that it had to do with the Brazilian dictatorship, I thought it was going to be the typical dictatorship story. So you would see militaries, you would see jails, you would see torture, you would see un dictador, and then it was the quiet impact of living under a dictatorship and how it's being felt on a daily life. No?
Yeah.
So that's what obviously surprised me the most, because I was expecting a different movie, not something like this. And then it reminded me of Mexico. That the comparison is that in Brazil it was a military dictatorship. In Mexico we live under a political dictatorship for 71 years. I was young when that was happening, and some of the elements that he plays with in the movie were present also while I was growing up. And
like what?
And the military around you, the soldiers around you, the fear of confronting the politician and the authority, the censorship, the fact that you were always looking around, that it was not that on TV and on the radio and newspapers you would never see anyone complaining. So those elements of fear were present. And obviously, of course, we can make a correlation with what's happening right now in the United States, which is not the same.
I was going to tell you, it's not the same at all. Actually, I'll correct myself. It is not the same, but it starts to have some elements. In fact, I'm talking to you from Washington, D.C. I'm visiting my sister right now. And as he was talking about sort of normalizing, the sort of repressive regime, this is kind of a very different comparison. But I remember a couple of months ago, walking down the streets of DC and being initially shocked by the presence of the National Guards members that Trump had deployed. Remember, like at the beginning, it was like such a big deal and you would see them everywhere and everyone was staring at them and everyone was wondering, what are you doing in the streets? And I'll tell you that by now, it's become so normal that I don't even have a reaction, right? Like I've seen them, I saw them yesterday walking, I saw a couple of them walking 2 days ago, and it has become normal. No, it's now kind of completely integrated into, the morning routine. I'm getting coffee. Oh, there they are. Is I think that's one of the things that I thought about. The other thing I thought was really interesting was when he said that, yes, this is a film about memory. It's also a film about forgetting, but then he used the word, it is also about intentional amnesia. And I thought that was so interesting, the way in which the government can intentionally figure out ways to erase certain memories from the collective, from the collective like brain space or memory.
Well, yeah, because by doing that, by erasing the past, by erasing what happens, then it's a way for them to rule. Another thing that I really like about the interview with Kleber is, first of all, that he spent the 45 minutes completely present. I don't know how many, I was going to say thousands, but how many hundreds of interviews he has given. Yeah. And I thought when we were scheduling the interview, I thought, wow, I mean, this man has spoken so much for the last...
He travels so much. He told us, right? He's like traveling. He's in the middle of campaigning. But you're right. Like as journalists, it's always so telling when you can physically feel. Yeah, because you feel special, but the fact is that it is incredibly difficult what he's doing. How many interviews like this he has given. So that's one thing. The other is the importance of speaking up. During the presidency of Jair Bolsonaro, he spoke up and he paid the price for that.
and the fear. I mean, you could tell in his voice the fear that happened when he decided to speak up against the dictatorship. And again, I think we have to make a correlation to what's happening right now in the United States. The importance that artists and writers and directors speak up when they see something that they think is not correct in a democracy. I think that lesson, it is incredibly important.
Yeah, and it made me think of the conversations that we had during the Super Bowl, and honestly, almost all of these conversations, which is what it means to be an artist in the United States carries this kind of additional weight and expectation and pressure that hasn't always been there. And I didn't get to ask him that, but I assume I know the answer. But I was wondering what he will do if he wins when he gets on that stage. And I think that's kind of the question that we have for everyone we're talking to. If you have a platform, if you have a microphone today in this country, what do you do with that power? And I think one of the last thoughts that I had is really when he talked about playing with artifacts and really the way in which art can expose truth, and get society to really think about that in a way that like politics can, or maybe like journalism can't even, but they can do it. Now they can do it. Even like fiction has an ability to talk about truth. And so again, I think to be an artist right now maybe carries a lot more weight and power than we think. And I think it's such an interesting moment.
I'm not sure if it's going to be his role to speak about the lack of democracy in the United States, but I wonder if other artists who win the Oscar would say something about it. Also, a question that I couldn't ask, it was just a matter of time. If the directors nowadays, Paola, if they're thinking of a different screen, I watched the movie on a TV screen. No, I didn't go to the movies to watch it. And I wonder if that is changing the way they think of the process of creating a movie, writing a movie.
I would assume he is someone you can tell that has been so influenced by film. No, es tan cinéfilo.
Screen, no?
I don't know how to say that word in English. ¿Cómo se dice cinéfilo?
Le preguntaste a la persona equivocada.
No, yo sé. But anyways, I think our listeners will understand what we're saying. But he seems like someone that stays very true, to film being shown in the way that it's supposed to be shown, and not like making art not for your phone, but making art for the screen. He seems like a guy that really kind of sticks to that, which I appreciate.
I went to AI here. Cinéfilo in Spanish.
No, en inglés. Cinephile.
Sí, será.
Okay.
¿Esa será la palabra?
Sí.
Ok. Bueno.
All right, on that note.
Dale, Paulis. Ok. Vamos a la siguiente película. Bye.
La siguiente.
Te quiero.
Bye, Pablo.
The Moment is a production of Radio Ambulante Studios in partnership with iHeart's My Cultura podcast network. Our staff includes Daniel Alarcón, Laura Rojas Aponte, and Lisa Cerda, with help from Paola Leán, Diego Corso, Natalia Ramírez, and Elsa Liliana Ulloa. The CEO of Radio Ambulante Studios is Carolina Guerrero. Executive producers at iHeart are Leo Gomez and Arlene Santana. Pablo Cabrera, Dylan Unger, and Mark Catton also serve as producers. Sound design, final mix, and theme song by Elias Gonzalez. Our hosts are Jorge Ramos and Paola Ramos. If you like this episode, please share the word. Recommend The Moment to anyone who might enjoy unpacking these complicated times with us. If you like The Moment, pero también te gustan los podcasts en español, check out Radio Ambulante Studios. Our shows, Radio Ambulante, El Hilo, and Central are really worth a listen. I'm Miguel Santiago Colón. Thanks for listening.